Commander Zexthal, stood on the bridge of his warship, looking down at the small blue planet below. His forearms crossed behind his back as he studied the world through the giant glass windows. The planet looked peaceful from up here, green and blue colors mixed together like paint on an artist's canvas. White clouds drifted slowly across the surface, but Zexthal knew better than to trust peaceful looks. His job was to bring order to the galaxy. Every new species had to follow the rules. Every planet had to join the Galactic Union or face the consequences. It was simple. It was logical. It had worked for over 3,000 years. His ship, the Covenant's Edge, was one of the most powerful vessels in the galactic fleet. It could destroy entire cities with a single blast. The weapons on board could crack a planet in half if needed. No species had ever seen such power and chosen to fight back. They always surrendered. The communications officer turned to face him. Her blue skin glowed softly in the bridge lights. "Commander, we have received the human response to our ultimatum." Zexthal's mandibles clicked together. This was always the easy part. The humans would surrender, beg for mercy, and agree to join the Union. Then his job would be done. Another primitive species brought into the fold of galactic civilization. "Play their response," he commanded. The main screen flickered to life. A human face appeared. The creature had pale skin and dark hair. Its eyes were small and round, not like the large compound eyes of Zexthal's people. The human wore some kind of military uniform with colorful patches on it. "This is General Robert Kane of Earth Defense Command," the human said. His voice was calm and steady. "We have received your ultimatum. Our response is simple. Come and take it." The screen went black. Zexthal stared at the empty screen for a long moment. His translator must have made an error. No species would give such a response when faced with certain destruction. He turned to his communications officer. "Play it again," he ordered. The message repeated, the same human, the same words. "Come and take it." The bridge fell silent. Zexthal's officers looked at each other with confusion. In all their years of service, no one had heard such a response. Species might ask for more time. They might try to negotiate. They never challenged the galactic fleet to come and fight. "Sir," said his tactical officer, "perhaps they do not understand the situation. Their technology is primitive. They may not realize the power we possess." Zexthal nodded slowly. That had to be it. The humans were simply too ignorant to understand. What they faced, he would have to show them. "Open a channel to the planet," he commanded. "All frequencies." The communications officer worked at her console. "Channel open, sir." Zexthal stepped forward. His voice echoed across space toward the blue world below. "People of Earth, this is Commander Zexthal of the Galactic Enforcement Division. You have seen one of our ships. We have 100 more just like it. Each ship carries enough firepower to destroy your largest cities. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your defenses cannot stop us. Surrender now and your people will be spared. Continue to resist and your world will burn. You have 1 hour to decide." He cut the transmission and waited. Surely now the humans would see reason. Surely now they would understand the futility of resistance. The hour passed slowly. Zexthal watched the planet below, looking for signs of surrender. Traditionally, species would begin broadcasting messages of submission. Their leaders would appear on screens, begging for mercy and promising to obey galactic law. But no such messages came from Earth. Instead, something else happened. The planet began to change. Lights appeared across the surface as cities powered up their defenses. Ships launched from hidden bases. The humans were not preparing to surrender. They were preparing to fight. "Sir," his sensor officer called out. "We are detecting massive military mobilization across the planet. They appear to be readying for combat." Zexthal's mandibles clicked rapidly. This made no sense. The humans had to know they could not win. The mathematics of the situation were clear. One galactic warship, could defeat 1,000 primitive vessels. "Bring in the prisoner," he ordered. A few minutes later, 2 guards escorted a human into the bridge. The creature was young, probably in the early stages of its short lifespan. It wore a torn flight suit and had cuts on its face from when they had captured its primitive fighter craft. The human's hands were bound, but it stood straight and looked directly at Zextal, without fear. "What is your name, creature?" Zextal asked. "Lieutenant Jake Martinez." "Earth Defense Force," the human replied. Its voice was steady, despite its situation. "Lieutenant Martinez, your people have been given a choice: surrender and live, or fight and die. Yet they choose to fight. Explain this madness." The human tilted its head slightly. "Madness? Maybe, but that's what we do. You will all die," Zextal said. "Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. You cannot possibly win against us." Jake Martinez smiled. The expression looked strange on the alien features, but Zextal recognized it as a sign of amusement. "You're probably right," the human said. "We'll probably lose. Most of us will probably die. But that's not really the point." "Then what is the point?" Zextal demanded. "The point is that you'll know you were in a fight," Martinez replied. "The point is that maybe the next species you try to push around will remember what happened here. The point is that some things are worth fighting for, even when you can't win." Zextal stared at the small creature. In all his years of service, he had never heard such words. Every species understood the basic logic of survival. When faced with superior force, rational beings surrendered to preserve their lives. "Species will become extinct," he said. "Is that worth your pride?" "Probably not," Martinez admitted. "But here's the thing about humans, Commander. We're really good at 2 things: making war and making more humans. And we've been doing both for a very long time." The human paused, looking directly into Zextal's large compound eyes. "You want to know the truth? We've been fighting impossible wars since before we could write. We fought each other when we only had sticks and stones. We fought nature when it tried to kill us with ice and fire. We fought disease and starvation and everything else this universe threw at us. And we're still here." Martinez leaned forward slightly, his voice growing quieter, but somehow more intense. "So yeah, you'll probably beat us. You've got better ships and better weapons. But beating us and making us quit are 2 very different things, and humans don't quit. We just don't know how." Zextal ordered the guards to take the prisoner away, but the human's words stayed with him as he prepared for battle. For the first time in his military career, he felt something he had no name for. Something that made his hands shake slightly as he gave orders to his crew. The feeling humans called doubt. The invasion began at dawn on Earth time. Zextal watched from his command chair as his ships descended through the atmosphere like silver daggers cutting through clouds. The first target was the human city called New York, intelligence reports said it was one of their major military centers. The plan was simple and logical: destroy their defenses quickly, show them the power of galactic technology, force them to surrender before too many died. It had worked on every other world, but as his ships approached the city, something went wrong. The humans were ready. Missiles rose from the ground like angry insects. They were primitive weapons that should have bounced harmlessly off his ship's shields. But there were so many of them. Hundreds, thousands. The sky filled with explosions and smoke. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the humans are using numerical superiority to overwhelm our defensive systems. This is highly inefficient." Zextal nodded. It was inefficient. No logical species would waste so many resources on a hopeless attack, but somehow a few missiles got through. Warning. Lights flashed on his bridge as his ship took minor damage. "Return fire," he ordered. "Target their launch sites." His weapons lanced down from the sky. Each blast could have destroyed a city block. But when the smoke cleared, more missiles came up from different locations. The humans had spread there. Weapons across the entire city. They were making his forces hunt for every single launcher. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, "we are detecting unusual movement patterns in the human forces." Zextal looked at the tactical display. The human soldiers were not retreating as expected. Instead, they were advancing. Small groups of them moved through the ruins, getting closer to his landing sites. "They are moving toward us," he said in confusion. "Why are they not falling back? 2 defensive positions?" His communications officer looked up from her console. "Sir, we are receiving reports from Landing Zone 7. Human forces have attacked our supply depot." "How many humans?" Zextal asked. According to Ground Commander Veltar, approximately 50 human soldiers attacked his position. 50. Zexiel's mandibles clicked in disbelief. He has 200 soldiers and advanced weapons. How could 50 primitives pose a threat? "Sir, the humans used unconventional tactics. They tunneled under the perimeter. They used explosive devices, hidden in what appeared to be supply containers. One human female destroyed an entire ammunition storage facility using improvised chemicals." Zextal stared at the report. According to galactic military doctrine, soldiers should never waste their lives in desperate attacks. They should preserve their forces and look for advantageous positions. But the humans seemed to do the opposite of everything he had learned in military academy. "Bring me this human female," he ordered. An hour later, they brought her to his ship. She was small, even for a human. Her hair was tied back, and her uniform was torn and dirty. Burns covered her arms and face. But like the pilot before her, she showed no fear. "What is your name?" Zextal asked. "Lieutenant Amy Foster. Combat." "Engineer Corps," she replied. "You destroyed our supply depot." "Yes, sir, I did." "You killed yourself doing it." "Your body should be dead from the explosion." Amy Foster shrugged. "Should be, but I'm not. Humans are harder to kill than most people." "Think." Zexal studied the small creature. According to his medical scans, she should indeed be dead. The chemical explosion had exposed her to radiation levels that would kill most galactic species. But somehow she was still alive and talking. "Why did you attack our position?" he asked. "You had to know it was suicide. It's because someone had to." She said simply, "Because it needed doing, because that's what soldiers do." But the tactical situation was hopeless. You could not win. Amy Foster smiled that strange human expression again. "Commander, I think you're confused about what winning means." "Explain." "You think winning means coming out alive with all your objectives completed? That's not how humans think about it. Sometimes winning just means making the other guy pay a price. Sometimes winning means buying time for someone else. Sometimes winning means proving a point." She leaned forward in her restraints. "You want to understand human tactics? Here's lesson 1. We don't fight to win battles. We fight to win wars. And wars aren't won by being logical. Wars are won by being more stubborn than the other guy." Zextal dismissed the prisoner, but her words troubled him. He began studying the human combat reports more carefully. The patterns made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare. Human soldiers would charge superior positions when they should retreat. They would sacrifice expensive equipment to save single soldiers. Would split their forces when military doctrine demanded concentration. They would fight to the death when surrender would preserve lives for future battles. But somehow, these illogical tactics were working. His forces were winning every engagement. They had superior weapons, better armor, more advanced technology. But each victory cost more than it should. Each battle took longer than planned. Each day, his casualty reports grew larger. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. They turned every building into a fortress, made every street a battlefield. They used their own destroyed vehicles as weapons against his forces during the siege of the human position called Central Park. Zextal watched something that made his mind hurt. A group of human civilians, not soldiers, attacked one of his heavy tanks. They had no weapons except bottles filled with flammable liquid. The tank could have killed them all easily, but they didn't attack the tank to destroy it. They attacked to distract it. While the tank focused on the civilians, human soldiers moved into position and disabled it with explosives. The civilians died, but they had served their purpose. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we have intercepted human communications from the battle zone." "What do they say?" "Civilians were volunteers, sir. They knew they would die. Their final message was, Tell our children we held the line. Zextal felt that strange feeling again, the feeling he had no name for. These humans were dying for abstract concepts that had no tactical value. They were sacrificing themselves for ideas that existed only in their minds. But those ideas were making them fight harder than any enemy he had ever faced. "Sir," his communications officer called. "We're receiving a transmission from the human commander." "Put it through." A new human face appeared on the screen. This one was older, with gray hair and lines around its eyes. It wore a uniform with many colorful symbols. "This is Colonel Ben Hayes, New York Defense Command. I have a message for you." Commander Zextal stepped forward. "I am Commander Zextal. Speak." "Commander, you've been fighting us for 3 days now. You've probably noticed that we don't fight like other species you've encountered. We fight inefficiently." Zextal replied, "You waste lives and resources." Colonel Hayes smiled. "That's one way to look at it. Here's another way. You've been fighting for 3 days and you still don't control our city. Your invasion timeline called for complete victory in 12 hours. How's that working out for you?" The transmission ended. Zextal looked at his tactical display. The human was right. According to the original plan, Earth should have surrendered by now. Instead, his forces were bogged down in dozens of separate battles across the planet. Each victory led to another fight. Each defeated human position was replaced by 2 more. For the first time in his career, Zextal began to wonder if superior technology was enough to win a war. 6 months had passed since the invasion began. Zextal stood in the detention facility on the outskirts of what humans called Chicago. The building was gray and cold, filled with captured human soldiers and civilians. But the resistance had not weakened. If anything, it had grown stronger. Every day brought new reports of human attacks. They struck supply convoys with homemade bombs. They sabotaged equipment with simple tools. They spread messages of defiance through hidden communication networks. The humans seemed to multiply like insects, appearing everywhere his forces tried. To establish control, Zextal walked through the detention center, trying to understand these creatures. His medical officers had studied them extensively. Humans were physically weak compared to most galactic species. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Their lifespans were short. Their bodies broke easily, yet they fought with an intensity that made no logical sense. He stopped at one of the cells. Inside sat an elderly human male with gray hair and kind eyes. The man wore simple clothes and had no military markings. According to the file, his name was Dr. Carl Peterson. He was some kind of teacher who studied human history. Dr. Peterson, Zextal said through the cell bars. "I would like to speak with you." The old man looked up and smiled. "Of course, Commander. Please sit down." Zextal activated a chair from the cell wall and sat across from the human. "I am trying to understand your species. You have been fighting us for 6 months. You cannot win. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your weapons are primitive. Yet you continue to resist. Why?" Dr. Peterson leaned back against the wall. "It's a good question, Commander. Would you like the short answer or the long one?" "I have time." "Well, the short answer is that fighting impossible odds is what humans do. It's who we are. But I suspect you want to understand why we are that way." Zextal nodded. "Tell me, Commander, has your species ever faced extinction?" "We have fought wars, yes, but we are logical. When victory becomes impossible, we negotiate. We find peaceful solutions." Dr. Peterson smiled sadly. "Humans have never had that luxury. You see, our world tried to kill us from the very beginning. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, diseases that wiped out entire populations, predators that hunted us for food." The old man stood and began pacing in his small cell. Other species evolved in safe environments. They developed intelligence to solve problems and work together. But humans evolved on a world that was actively trying to murder us. We developed intelligence to survive when everything else failed. "I do not understand how this relates to your resistance," Zextal said, "because survival taught us something. Unique, Commander. We learned that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose. We learned that impossible odds just mean you have to be more creative. Dr. Peterson sat back down and looked directly at Zexthal. Let me tell you a story. Long ago, there was a place called Thermopylae. 300 human soldiers faced an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die. Everyone knew they would die, but they fought anyway. That is illogical, Zexthal protested. They accomplished nothing by dying, did they? Dr. Peterson asked. Those 300 men held the pass for 3 days. Their sacrifice inspired their entire nation to fight. The larger army that killed them was eventually defeated. And thousands of years later, humans still tell that story, still remember those names, still draw strength from their example. The old man leaned forward. You see, Commander, humans learned something that I think your species never did. We learned that some things are more important than living. Some things are worth dying for. And once you understand that, once you really believe it, you become very dangerous. Zexthal felt uncomfortable. The human's words reminded him of conversations with other prisoners. They all spoke of concepts that had no tactical value: honor, freedom, dignity. These were not things you could measure or count. Dr. Peterson, your people speak often of freedom. But freedom is just a word. It has no physical substance. Why do you fight for something that does not exist? The old man was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Commander, can you feel happiness? Yes. Can you touch happiness? Can you hold it in your hands? Can you put it on a scale and weigh it? No, of course not. Then happiness does not exist. Zexthal paused. It exists in the mind. Exactly. Freedom exists in the mind. So does honor, so does hope. The human mind, Commander, is a very powerful thing. It's powerful enough to make people do impossible things. Dr. Peterson stood and walked to the small window in his cell. Let me tell you another story. In our recent history, there was a place called the Warsaw Ghetto. A small group of civilians was trapped in a city by a powerful army. They had almost no weapons, no military training. There's no hope of rescue. What happened to them? They fought. For months, they fought. They made weapons from scraps of metal. They built fortifications from rubble. They turned every building into a battlefield. The army that attacked them had tanks and aircraft and trained soldiers. But it took them longer to defeat that small group of civilians than it took to conquer entire nations. The old man turned back to face Zexthal. Those people knew they would die. But they also knew that their fight would be remembered, that it would inspire others, that it would prove something important about what humans are willing to endure. What is that? We will not go quietly into the dark, that we will make you pay for every inch, that we will turn our defeat into your nightmare. Zexthal left the detention facility that day with his mind spinning. He began reading human history files that his intelligence officers had gathered. The stories were all the same, humans facing impossible odds and fighting anyway. He read about a place called Stalingrad, where humans fought building by building for months. About a beach called Normandy, where they charged into certain death to establish a foothold. About a city called Berlin, where they fought house by house until nothing was left but rubble. But the most disturbing stories were the ones about humans fighting each other. They had spent thousands of years developing new and better ways to kill their own species. They had turned warfare into an art form. They had practiced on each other until they became perfect at it. And now, all that practice, all that experience, all that accumulated knowledge of how to fight impossible wars was focused on his forces. That night, Zexthal sat alone in his quarters, looking out at the human city below. Lights flickered in windows where families lived their daily lives despite the occupation. Smoke rose from chimneys where people cooked meals and told stories to their children. The humans were not just resisting militarily, they were resisting culturally. They were keeping their civilization alive, even under occupation. They were teaching their children to remember who they were and what they fought for. For the first time since the invasion began, Zexthal wondered if his forces were winning at all. They controlled territory. Yes. They had destroyed human military units. Yes. But the humans themselves remained unconquered. He began to understand that there was a difference between defeating an army and defeating a people. And humans, it seemed, might be impossible to defeat completely. The thought filled him with something his species had no word for. Something that made his hands shake and his mind race with dark possibilities. The feeling humans called fear. The final battle came in a place humans called Denver. It had been 1 year since the invasion began. 1 full year of fighting a species that should have surrendered in hours. Zexthal stood on a hill overlooking the city, watching the last organized human resistance prepare for their final stand. His forces surrounded the city completely. There was no escape, no reinforcements coming, no hope of rescue. Intelligence reports said the humans inside had enough food for maybe 2 weeks. Their ammunition was running low. Their equipment was breaking down, by every measure of military logic. The battle was already over. But Zexthal had learned not to trust logic when it came to humans. "Sir," his tactical officer reported. "General Lisa Parker has requested a meeting under flag of truce." Zexthal nodded. Perhaps finally the humans would see reason. Perhaps their leader would negotiate a surrender that would spare what remained of their people. The meeting took place in a small building between the lines. General Parker was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore a clean uniform despite months of fighting. When she walked into the room, she moved like a soldier who had never considered the possibility of defeat. General Parker, Zexthal said, "I assume you wish to discuss terms of surrender." She sat down across from him and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Actually, Commander, I wanted to give you one last chance to withdraw your forces and leave our planet." Zexthal stared at her. Even now, surrounded and outnumbered, facing certain death, this human was offering him terms. "General, you have perhaps 5,000 soldiers left. I have 50,000. You have limited supplies. I have orbital support. You cannot possibly believe you can win this battle." "You're right," she said calmly. "We can't win this battle. That's not really the point anymore, is it?" "Then what is the point?" General Parker leaned back in her chair. "The point, Commander, is what happens after. You see, you've been fighting us for a year now. A full year to defeat one primitive planet. How do you think that looks to the rest of the galaxy?" Zexthal felt that familiar, uncomfortable feeling. The one that had been growing stronger each day. "Your forces were supposed to be invincible," she continued. "Quick, clean victories. Overwhelming technological superiority. But we've made you bleed for every mile. We've cost you ships, soldiers, time, and resources. We've proven that your empire can be hurt." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at her city. Right now, on 1,000 different worlds, other species are watching what happens here. They're learning from our example. They're seeing that resistance is possible, that your technology isn't magic. You can be beaten if someone is willing to pay the price. "You will all die," Zexthal said quietly. "Yes, we will. But our children will remember, and their children will remember. And someday, someone will finish what we started." General Parker turned back to face him. "Want to know something funny? Commander, we've been recording everything. Every battle, every tactic, every weakness we've discovered in your forces. All of it is being broadcast to hidden transmitters throughout the galaxy. Win or lose here, the knowledge of how to fight. You survives." The meeting ended without agreement. General Parker returned to her forces. Zexthal returned to his command post. The final battle would begin at dawn, but that night, something happened that Zexthal would never forget. The humans began to sing. It started in one section of the city, few voices joining together in harmony. Then more voices joined. The song spread from building to building, street to street, till the entire city was singing together. Zexthal listened to the translation. It was an old human song about overcoming darkness, about hope surviving despite impossible odds, about standing together when everything seemed lost. His communications officer looked up from her console. "Sir, we are detecting similar singing from resistant cells across the planet. They are all singing the same song." The voices continued through the night. Thousands of humans facing certain death, singing together in defiance, not crying, not begging, not surrendering, singing. Battle began at sunrise. Zexthal's forces advanced with overwhelming firepower. Ships bombarded defensive positions. His soldiers moved forward with advanced weapons and armor. The humans fought back with everything they had. They used improvised explosives hidden in rubble. They fired from windows and rooftops. They turned every street into a battlefield. But what broke Zextal's mind was not the fighting itself. It was the way they fought. A young human soldier named Tony Clark held a critical intersection for 6 hours against impossible odds. When his ammunition ran out, he used rocks. When reinforcements couldn't reach him, he continued fighting alone. When Zextal's forces finally overran his position, they found his body surrounded by improvised traps and messages written on the walls. "Remember why we fight," one message said. "Remember what we're fighting for." Another read, "Tell my mom I held the line." And then, "Humans don't quit. Pass it on." As the battle continued, Zextal watched more scenes that defied everything he understood about warfare. Medics who ran into gunfire to save wounded soldiers, engineers who stayed at their posts to keep power running to civilian shelters, teachers who used their final moments to record lessons for children who might never be born. They fought not just with weapons, but with poetry and songs. They left messages for future generations. They turned their deaths into stories that would inspire others. They made their final battle into a legend that would outlive them all. By evening, the city was burning. The last human positions had fallen. General Parker died leading a final charge against his command post. The resistance was broken. Zextal had won. But as he stood in the smoking ruins of Denver, watching his soldiers search through the rubble, he realized something that filled him with terror. The humans had won too. They had lost every battle. But somehow they had won the war. They had proven that his empire was not invincible. They had shown the galaxy that resistance was possible. They had turned their defeat into a victory that would echo across the stars for generations. That night, Zextal sat alone in his quarters, writing his final report. His hands shook as he typed the words that would change everything. Personal. Log, Commander Zextal. Final entry. The human resistance has been defeated. All organized military opposition has ceased. Earth is under galactic control. But I fear we have not conquered them. We have simply given them a larger canvas on which to paint their defiance. They have taught me that there are fates worse than death, and things more powerful than technology. They have shown me that the most primitive species can possess the most advanced understanding of what it means to be truly alive. The humans spoke often of freedom and honor and hope. I thought these were just words. I was wrong. These concepts are weapons more dangerous than any plasma cannon. They're ideas that spread like viruses, infecting other species with the belief that they too can resist. We came here to bring order to the galaxy. Instead, we have unleashed chaos. We have shown every oppressed species in the galaxy that giants can bleed, that empires can fall, that hope can survive even the darkest night. I do not know what comes next, but I know that nothing will ever be the same. The humans have changed the rules of the game forever, and I am no longer certain which side is winning. Zextal sent the report and leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, Earth turned slowly in space, still blue and green, and beautiful. Still home to a species that had taught the galaxy a new definition of strength, he closed his eyes and tried not to think about what would happen when other worlds heard the human story, tried not to imagine what would happen when other species learned that resistance was possible. But deep in his mind, he could still hear the echo of those voices singing in the darkness, still see the words written on broken walls, still feel the weight of understanding that some things are stronger than starships and more lasting than empires. The humans were gone. But their lesson would live forever, and that thought terrified him more than any weapon ever could.